Oh, hey. Hey.
How you doing? Okay, sports.
Derek Jeter!
Movies.
You know we trust you.
What? That's lenient? That's lenient?
Doctor Evil.
Sports, movies. What else?
I don't drink. I don't smoke. I play video games.
Beat him to a pulp. What's up, sweat hog?
Atlantic Monthly, June 12th, 2011.
Some of it's a lot of fun.
I got all the time I could want right here in my head. I can come and go as I please. You always understand. Guess I should be happy. Don't even know how all this began. I wish we cared enough to fight about it every now and then. 'Cause what I want and what I have are two different things. What you were is not what you've become. We've lost so much in between. What I wanted and what I have, two different things.
Honey, turn the record off. Put your car keys on the table. You know I can't tell you everything, but I'll say what I am able. Always try to please you. Guess I'll try it once again.
Or I change the things I do unless you let me in. 'Cause what I want, what I have are two different things. What you were is not what you become. We lost so much in between. 'Cause what I wanted and what I had, two different things. There it is, it's on the table. We said all there is to say. You keep the name and the number. You let me go, I'll let you stay. It's what I want, what I have, two different things. What you were is not what you become. We lost so much in between. It's what I wanted and what I had, two different things. What I wanted and what I had, two different things.
La da da da, 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 la da.
Well, so what you have with the Magills, Matt and Megan, is something like that song. The tension between what could be and what is pretty palpable sometimes. we're probably the least qualified individuals to talk about healthy marriage, and yet that may in fact make us pretty qualified. I often wonder what it is sometimes for her, or I actually don't have to wonder, she tells me, when I'm playing and she sees two things in me. You were saying this the other night, that she's like, I have this unbelievable admiration for you, and it's coupled with an equal amount of disdain. Disdain, yeah. Oh, or I mean, was that right? Did I say
That's it. Yeah.
pretty apt
Disdain.
word.
I
Disdain.
appreciate
Yeah. I mean, I'm not pulling any punches here.
Yeah.
We're gonna be honest. I was in a church a couple months back, and we're in Texas, so there's some of that sort of Southern culture and sort of folk theology, and some of it gets mixed. And we had this youth pastor that got up and he said, "Isn't it wonderful to be in a place where saint and sinner can gather together?" I was like, oh boy, what am I going to say? Because that's way off. And I just got on the mic right after that and said, yes, and they both reside here. Saint and sinner here. So as I kind of start out this talk about couples, I want to talk to you a little bit about what it is to hold two very different things in the same hand. So one of my favorite authors, Paul Zoll, was I think pontificating, as he often does, in one of his PZ's podcasts. And Megan and I love this. It's something that we have referred to a lot. And it's where he says, to say to yourself or out loud or to your spouse, I am the world's greatest lover, is at the same time completely absurd and totally true. Now that may be lost on you, but I know what that feels like. And for performers, we are oftentimes putting our best foot forward, trying to be what we are, but oftentimes what's going on behind the quote-unquote curtain is a very different thing than what we are exuding. The Avett brothers wrote in, I don't feel good standing. Can we sit for a moment, or kind of all over the place here? Let me see.
Yeah, just sit.
One of my favorite bands, the Avett brothers.
It'll be right
At the same height. That's it. One of my favorite bands writes in a song called Life. He says, wouldn't it be fine to stand behind the words we say in the best of times? Oh, you and I know all too well about the hell and paradise right here on earth. So the reality is I was once a very duplicitous person, but didn't realize it. And now I'm a duplicitous person, but I know that I am. And so I am seeking to be reminded of that reality continually, and yet I don't have to be reminded of that reality continually because I have a reminder of that, and she has a reminder of that. So
yeah, I mean, we were both living kind of double lives when we met. We met on the stage. Matt was Tommy in the rock opera, the Who's rock opera, Tommy, the pinball wizard. And I really kind of looked at him and thought, wow, that's a great looking guy, but run for the hills, that is not the guy I'm gonna bring home to my parents. He just did not make the checklist, so to speak. So because I was living this duplicit life, I just started a very worldly kind of fling, for lack of a better word, with him. Some 11 was in summer stock. And that really should have been where it ended. It should have just been kind of another mistake for me, another, I guess, conquest for you. And we stayed together. And even though we were not walking with the Lord, even though I was raised in church, I was very far from God. Matt was not a proclaiming Christian, so he was actually the better of the two, because I was proclaiming God but looked the exact same as him, you know. And even in those earliest days, we got very honest with each other and came clean about things that frankly I'd never told anyone. And I think the same holds true for you. And instead of doing what we typically did, which was to run, we stayed together. And I think that God had his hand on us even when we didn't know it, through that kind of common experience of grace that we showed one another. Like, wow, that's disgusting, and I'm gonna stay with you.
Yeah, and in some ways we were married before we were married, because we knew the worst about one another, and we had that common experience of, wait, she knows me for who I really am, and she's staying. This is blowing my mind. And why would I ever want to not be with this person who would love me in spite of myself?
So we got married, we moved to New York City. We moved there to pursue dreams of singing and songwriting, and I was a musical theater actress, so I did the whole Broadway circuit. And we moved there in September of 2001, so just 10 days before September 11th. And it was just kind of a time that everything was upside down and crazy, and that was the case for the two of us. I mean, we really put on this great show when we left Texas, and it was like, you know, small town kids going to the Big Apple, they're married, and they're not just gonna shack up, which, I mean, I don't know why that's the one thing that we didn't want people to know about. You know, it's like we can do X, Y, Z, A, B, C, but we're not gonna live together. That's one thing we're not gonna do. I guess it's a cultural thing. So we got married, we moved to the city, and realized very quickly that we didn't like each other. I mean, I didn't like you.
Yeah, and I didn't like that you didn't like me.
Yeah, but you weren't very likable.
That's true.
I mean, you were a drug addict.
Mm-hmm.
You were running around doing only you and the Lord knows what.
Yeah. I think that there was a little bit of Joel in me, to piggyback on what RJ was just saying. You know, I felt like I had the world before me, and there was kind of the law of capability. I knew, I think you did too. You knew what you could do, but that was burdensome. Mm-hmm. And, you know, it was not very long until we were at the end of our rope, and we were thinking, you know, I can't quit getting high. She can't quit being mean to me. Yeah, so we found a community of believers that allowed us to be open and honest, and said, look, we have the same kind of junk, and fall on Jesus. Mm-hmm. And things began to change. And I think one particular story that really gets to the heart of what I really want to talk about today is the Thanksgiving 2004, after I had, you know, God had really entered our life and began to, you know, clean out some things, and yet I was finding, you know, this whole struggle of the tension between who I want to be and who I find myself, you know. So my understanding of grace was just getting, you know, just as it continued to do. But my parents had come to visit from Oklahoma, and I said, well, I'm going to show them how much I've changed, and I'm going to be this and that.
And I was so thrilled about that. I was like, yes, you're going to minister to your parents, and you're not just that rock star guy. You've got something to say, and you're going to change your parents' life. Yeah. You're going to tell them the truth.
Yeah, and my parents' sort of understanding of their own justification is really wrapped up in their three boys, my three sons. You know, this sense of accomplishment. And so when Megan entered the picture and started to tell me I was a sinner, they didn't want to have anything to do with that. And they said, well, you're not at all. You are a good, you're a good, saying things about me, affirming essentially themselves in me. And they came to New York City, and I was so hungry for intimacy with my father, and I wanted to tell him about this new album I was making and take him down to Greenwich Village, and
I just have to pause really quick. No. Yeah. Because I thought when you guys went down to the village, I really thought that's when you were going to just share your heart. So I spent the day with your mom window shopping
My mom doesn't buy, she likes to window shop,
Right.
which has kind of been irritating my whole life.
Well, because she would take me into these really exquisite shops and then, have me try things on. Then just like take a picture. Then we'd leave. And I'm like, okay, sorry. Never intended to buy that. So.
Anyway, Mom, if you're watching this, we love you. But we went out, we were down in the village, my father and I, we started having some margaritas. And before long, one turned into five. And as males often do, greater intimacy and foolishness is achieved through intoxication. And, so I should say a false intimacy. But we ended up jumping in a cab and going up because we got to meet Megan and my mom for dinner. And I leave my cell phone in the cab. And at that time, a cell phone was a precious commodity to me, and there weren't these replacement plans, and we didn't have any money. And I got to there, and not only was Megan upset that I was clearly drunk,
As a skunk.
but I had also left my cell phone in the cab.
Which we'd saved up to get.
Yes, and so she starts crying.
I couldn't help
At
it, you
dinner.
guys. You know when you can feel like that like it gets hot and you know it's about to come, and you try to just like pinch yourself or will yourself not to cry, and you literally, it just takes over. Like you
Yeah.
just start crying. That's what happened in this nice Turkish restaurant with my drunk husband and father-in-law, and I'm just crying and I can't stop. And I'm like, I'm so sorry.
And my father becomes irritated, and he says, here's $100. Just stop crying. It's not that big of a deal, He's like, I'll pay for it, just stop it. I can't take this, And he said, you've got to understand that Matt may be a fool, but he's our fool. And Megan says, I did not marry a fool. And it was like one of the most sober moments of my life, instantly, because I found that there was a battle for me. And what was happening for me was something akin to what is talked about in Romans 4, where God is called the God who calls things that are not as though they are. And because at that moment, and as I looked back through my past, I realized that I really was a fool, but Megan was seeing me not as I was, but as God saw me. And there was this miraculous level of imputation that was put on me, and I realized that I was so blessed to have you. And so, that began, a move for me away from who I was, and yet that continues to this day and will until my dying day, but towards that God who calls things that are not as though they were. But the truth is, and this is what I'm finding the longer that we're married, that if you want to live, it might not be healthy to be married. Because it's been said, that without two funerals there can't be a marriage. And so we have to go back and understand,
Wait, my sweet man just married this precious couple, and with all of the flowers and the accoutrement, that's how he started the service. He was like, today we are here for 2 funerals. And I was like, okay.
Well, it's true, right? I mean, it is the death of the single man, it is the death of the single woman to be married.
That's right.
And to be married to God, or at least, to understand what is, God's sort of intertwining with me, is to recognize that I was crucified on the cross with Christ, and that now the life I live in Him. And yet, and this is where the sort of the title of our talk comes from, is that there's this zombie that wants to live in me. And sometimes she talks to me in a way that is like sniffing salts to the zombie.
Right, smelling salts.
Smelling salts.
Yeah.
That just is like, wake up and be the jerk that I know you are. Because in a way, and this is, kind of getting into, in a way, it's safer, it's safer for Megan to assume, and it's not as risky, see, it's safer for Megan to assume the worst of me. because then she doesn't have to be surprised by the hurt that's coming her way inevitably. And I think vice versa. And so that's the way we sort of tend to live like zombies in this mix of death in our home. Sometimes, again, it sounds very morose, but that's really it. The tension between who we want to be and who we are just exists in marriage, and it especially, when I look in the mirror, I mostly see the best things about myself.
I love that about you. I do. I mean,
It's like your mom who keeps gaining. No, don't talk about that. Okay, good. Yeah. Oh, yes, we're being recorded. This can't happen, by the way. We're just not used to that.
We're not used to being captured on tape.
I know, everything we have has to happen live, and that's it. There's nothing else, because it's too off book. I don't even know where we are on these notes here. So the sin and the resultant blame, or the light of God's grace shed, that sinners might know freedom from grudge holding and indebtedness, because it really is a blame game, isn't it, in marriage? Can just somebody go, yes, it is, it's okay, if you both do it, then, yeah, so it's like I'm trying to continually reason in myself why I'm the better spouse, and why she's lucky to have me, and vice versa. Everything I say today, you can just sort of assume the and vice versa, right? It's a little bit different between men and women, but by and large, we're both just sinners seeking to look good and be thought well of, both by the other and by the world. So in my mind, I would rather my dead spouse live. That way I'll have someone to blame for my anxieties and my disappointments and failures. So shovel in hand, the zombie in me seeks to remind the zombie in her that she lives. And I guess it's consciously or subconsciously, I don't even know, but it's like there's this sense of, like Psalm 23, of though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. And the truth is, it's like the sinful us is like the shadow reality. If it's not really the valley of death, it's the shadow of the valley of death. It seems like death, and we have to be reminded that we're already dead. Sort of like around the Battle of the Bulge in the Band of Brothers, where the young Marine has just come over, and he's being told, he can't get up, he's just petrified, he can't move, and the other soldier says, just understand you're already dead, and then we can go, and then you can move. When you recognize, look, you're already dead, so now just move on in, with freedom towards whatever thing you were afraid of. So, oftentimes we, probably like you, can lie in bed 1,000,000 miles apart. Because we're together. It would be. I don't know. Maybe you can speak to this a little bit. I mean, we are both individual performers. It's not like one of us is demure and sweet and kind and quiet, and while the other has the spotlight. Just applauses and it says you did a good job, honey. When I miss a chord, it affects her.
Right.
You maybe, I don't know, what do you want?
No, definitely.
And so she's to be together is to risk.
Yes.
In both what we do vocationally and just being married.
Yeah, I mean, just think about when you and your spouse are trying to work together, and now imagine having an audience to watch that. It's difficult. It's very difficult, but all the more reason why we cannot continue to call out the dead person. I think for me, it really is about control. We talked about that in the parenting session, which was so good. But I think that if he knows that I have his number, like, oh, I know what you're going to do before you do it. Like, it gives me the upper hand. And I know, it's gross. I just am telling you.
Well, and the truth is the life that I have lived before her, beside her, in front of her, around her, it has helped her to build a case against me.
Exactly. But it's not a real case. I mean, it's like the little vendors at the fair or a little kiosk in the mall, and they say, sit down, I'll do a little cartoon drawing of you, and you're like, oh, okay, it's only $5, $10. So you sit there and you smile like it's gonna be a beautiful portrait, and then they hand it to you. And it's like these exaggerated things, right? I'm like, oh wow, my eyebrows are that black, and my nose is that big, and oh, okay, I didn't know that's how, you know, I came across. But that's what it's like. It's like I put together this false, exaggerated composite from sins of the past, from hurts of the past, and then there was that, and then I have this really unrealistic
dead man. The forgiven man, right? But you see the condemned man.
Right.
And so you nurture dislike and blame and distrust and cynicism and these assumptions and accusations, and you know, I'm guilty before I ever, you know, again, I'm speaking to you. I mean, what that really, I just pretty much, what I have been, you know, I'm just a mama's boy, okay? I was raised by a woman, which most of us were post-industrialization, you know, raised by women, and then in school taught by women. I had learned by, you know, a very young age how to, this sounds bad, but please women.
Placate.
Yeah, and so and so now I, instead of any sort of, you know, leadership and you know, active, you know, righteousness in our home, oftentimes I'm just trying to not make you upset, or I'm trying to please you. Bottom line is I'm trying to get my affirmation from my wife instead of what has already been said about me in Christ. And that sucks bad, and yet it seems to be the same thing every day, you know, to varying degrees. I mean, it is the struggle in marriage, isn't it? And so, you know, I read the quote from the hymn Horatius Bonner wrote, "Upon a life I did not live, O Jesus, Son of God, I build on what thy cross has done for me. There both my death and life I read, my guilt and my pardon there I see." Okay? When we see the cross, we see our life and we see our death. We see our guilt and we see our pardon. And that has, in that way, you know, marriage, you know, I think there's an old rabbinical saying that says your wife is a weapon against you. Now that sounds harsh.
You think?
Yeah. But I think God, in you know, in the hands of a gracious God, it has been less a weapon and more, you know, a surgeon's scalpel that oftentimes does cut to heal, and that shows me, you know, you know, she can show me the, you know, the spiritual temperature of my home a lot of times in ways that I'm just, because I'm just trying to please her instead of God.
And the truth is, I mean, I get it. I'm a strong personality. I've got very kind of steadfast opinions, and that can be a lot. But I also really believe that my chief job is I'm a helpmate. That's my ministry is to my husband and to my children first. And I have a lot of friends that say, you know, my husband is involved in this kind of web of sin or this destructive behavior, and I'm just going to pray for him, and you know, God will just have to handle him. And I'm thinking, but you're his wife. Like, God has appointed you as a helpmate. I mean, hopefully in a more tender fashion than I do, you can lovingly talk to him about these things and help kind of hold up the mirror about some of these things, instead of just in a way kind of say, yeah, he's messed up, but at least I'm not, and I'll just pray for him. It's almost kind of condescending. So, you know, I take it to be a huge responsibility, and I hope, you know, the same is true for you, that you're very good you're so much more loving and tender than me. I don't know why, but you are. I mean, you tell me things about myself that are hard to hear, but you do it in a digestible way. Like I can.
Yeah, because you can come off malicious. right?
Just said that.
But you
don't have to affirm it.
but that's the thing is the dead man in me leads you there. The aloofness and unconscientiousness about your very heart that I exhibit so often leads you into a place of such insecurity, fear and anxiousness that it causes you to be angry, and it causes you to question what in the world. I mean, it's like the song said, what I wanted and what I got, what I have, are two different things. And learning to be in marriage is learning to die to, it's learning to die to that idea of what you thought it was going to be, and learning that God has different things in mind, and maybe the death is what is required. Probably the death is what is required. So I have this sense of like, I want my wife to see the man who can get her done, right? I mean, isn't that kind of the whole sense? You've heard this said that women need love, men need respect. Like, not that it's that easy of an equation, but there's something there, that I just want to know that she thinks,
You're the greatest human being that ever lived.
Yeah, and more. I want her to see the man that God was right to get on his team, the man who only needs Jesus a little. Ultimately, I want my wife to be in love with a person that does not exist. And so I lean into self-sufficiency. I lean into this sense of I can get it done on my own, and I end up hurrying and planning more than I can do and trying to justify my very salvation in what I think John Piper calls a debtor's ethic. You saved me, so I'm going to show you for the rest of my life how right you were to save me. And that's just a futile thing that will lead you into just a greater self-absorption and ultimately alienation from the ones that need you most. And so, and I don't know. I mean, you're detailing pretty well what.
Yeah,
where you're
I
at.
spoke to it earlier, that kind of need to control and that need, to kind of have that upper hand, which got a chuckle from the front row. Yeah.
So it was interesting also that that RJ mentioned. Is it Gerard Ford? I've been reading on being a theologian of the cross. And it was funny. We were like in this wonderful family vacation in Mexico, and the kids are all playing, and it's just paradise. And I'm sitting here reading the Heidelberg Disputation, and Megan's like, "What is wrong with you?" I'm like, "I am loving this. It's like the greatest thing." The sense that, do you know about calling a bad thing good and a good thing bad? If you don't, just type that in. Calling a bad thing, and you'll come up with some wonderful things about that Gerard Ford wrote about this. And so the sense is a hard marriage bad? Is a hard marriage bad? A hard marriage is good. A hard marriage is having its way with you. A hard marriage is God putting you to death. And that's a good thing, right? A good marriage, an easy marriage, a marriage with nothing, where there's no real bumps.
Hey, BFF.
Hey. So that's our problem. That's our thing, is that we are in a posture continually of, because of the vocation that God has called us to, because of the gifts that we have, and because, quite frankly, I sound better when she's singing with me, and she sounds better when I'm singing with her. We have to do this thing together. I don't even know who I am anymore apart from her, and yet it's killing me. And it's killing her day by day.
The one flesh.
Dying so that we can become one flesh. And so this has been really the thing is that I'm calling a good thing good. A hard marriage is a good thing, and it has
You
been.
mean you're calling a bad thing good?
No, I'm really calling a good thing good because it is a good thing.
though
Now
it's
we're all
bad.
confused. I don't know. Maybe we need somebody else. Maybe somebody with one of these callers on that can really explain all of this a little bit better than me. But the sinner in each of us would rather kill than be killed. Crucify than be crucified. And it's only by preaching Christ crucified that we can assume this posture of weakness with one another. And we can assume it safely, right? Because I just keep wanting to put my best foot forward. I keep wanting her to respect me. I keep wanting her to trust me. And she keeps, and the more that I, just like RJ was saying, the more that I kind of bear down on who I am and what I do, the more release valve and freakouts that I have, and aloofness and unconscientiousness that I exhibit from her, and it drives her crazy, and she acts nuts, and I get scared of her, and so I think now I've got to please her again. I mean, it's just a toilet bowl thing that happens until we finally, once again, recognize, oh yeah, Christ died for this. Christ died for our marriage. Christ died so that we could lose ourselves and live in him. And with this power that, you know, God doesn't just create marriage, he sustains it.
That's right.
And the power of marriage, I really believe, and this is another thing that Mr. Ford said, was that that Christ is power hidden in weakness. Right? And I've been also reading, Will's book, leading some men through it, Eden and Afterward. And the other morning I was in our coffee shop downtown, and I had opened it up before anybody got there, and it was there was light on me, but there was darkness down beyond in this big space in this coffee house church thing that we have up in Tyler, where we're from. And I thought I heard some noises, and it's a big space, and it was 6:30 in the morning, and I'm just kind of a skittish guy anyway. So I thought, I didn't know who was in there. Maybe somebody got in, stayed overnight, and just waiting to kill me. I don't know. But I thought, and I kind of was looking, and I thought maybe I saw a shadowy something coming out, and before long, it got more clear and more clear and more clear. And it was a guy that worked at the coffee shop, and he was coming.
Imagine that.
And I didn't have a stroke, which might very, if you know me, I mean, I'm scared of dogs and cats and most of everything. I'm just kind of I'm on edge most of the time, which is a problem. I realize now, I feel like I'm on a couch. Yes, thank you. That loving touch I need. But anyway, as I'm reading this Will McDavid book, I feel like that's what God has done, right? That God starts in the largeness of creation, kind of unknown except in his bigness and his mysteriousness. And with each covenant that he makes, with each time that Abraham screws up, David screws up, that God comes, instead of backing away, which would be the smart thing for God to do, he comes closer and closer and closer and smaller and smaller and smaller and weaker and he obligates himself further and further and further to sinful man. And he becomes smaller and smaller until he becomes what? In utero, in the fragility of a child. And then becomes weaker and weaker and weaker until he allows us to kill him. And the truth is that I really think that, I'm certain of it more than anything, is that our marriage, the power in our marriage is power hidden in weakness. And that's really the only power. Strength, which is, what is strength? Strength is a good thing, yes? No. It's a bad thing. So what I need is weakness, because that's where the power is. That's where the power is hidden. And that has been not only displayed, but made possible through the Spirit within me. I'm kind of going on a little bit. Do you want me to sing that song? Okay, I'm going to do this song that I wrote that's based on... And then we can talk a little bit, because that's really what I'm looking forward to now. This is a song that I wrote based around this same thing, this same idea. And it's called Helping Hands. I need to turn this back on, right?
You're leaving, said you won't return this time, said you're so tired of sharing me with the me I left behind. The days before he met you, He was blissfully unaware of all the damage he has done. It showed by how little he cared. He got more than 9 lives. He keeps on crawling out the ground. So if I'm slipping back into the man I was before you came around, come back home, baby. I need your helping hands to put him down. How quickly I can forget all the wicked ways of man. No sooner was I rescued, found I was sinking back in. Enemy you'd hoped you were rid of, that you like an injury you can't shake, hangs around this house like a 3-night guest, and the hints you give him he don't take. More than 9 lives. He keeps on crawling out the ground. So if I'm slipping back into the man I was before you came around, come back home, baby. I need your helping hands to put him down. It's a bittersweet life between the man I am and the one I wanna be. And it's you by my side, somehow helping me to break free. 'Cause he got more than 9 lives. He keeps on crawling out the ground. So if I'm slipping back into the man I was before you came around, come back home, baby. I need your helping hands to put him down. So that's kind of the, I probably could have just sung the song. You know, I didn't need to do all the talking. But I hopefully that came across as that, you know, we are together better than we are alone. And our marriage is evidence of God's love to us, His covenant love that sustains us continually. So I guess
the way that we can love each other when we're awful to each other.
Love each other in spite of each other. You know?
That's evidence of His love for us.